Yet another moment where saying it out loud makes it feel even less logical than it was when reading it. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of my series where I recap and review every single Animorphs video then. Every single book in the Animorphs series, unless it's a spin-off, I'm not reading them. This month we are looking at Animorphs 24, The Suspicion. If we were reading this at publication date, it would be December 1998, and we are one book away from where these things start being ghostwritten. But believe me when I say, things are already getting quite weird. But be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, so that you don't miss out on any of that excitement when it does come. As you'll see from the front cover, we have another Cassie book on our hands. Cassie is my favourite character, and anteaters are one of my favourite animals, so let's go. But before we have our standard Animorphs opening, we have the following. Go forth, mighty warriors, go forth into space. All the galaxy shall tremble before the Helmacrons. All will obey us, all will be our slaves, for only we are truly worthy to be lords of the universe. Posthumous exhortation of the Emperor from the log of the Helmacron ship Galaxy Blaster. But as far as the Animorphs are aware, it's not the Helmacrons they are currently facing, it is the Yeerks, and Cassie lets us know in the usual Animorphs opening. She fills us in on just how rubbish it is to be on Earth during a Yeerk invasion. And now you see why we really didn't need a second alien invasion of Earth. I mean, isn't one enough? So it seems like every single chapter or every single chunk of this book has the log from one of the Helmacron ships at the start of it. I won't read them all because I'm dangerously close to copyright infringement as it is, and we don't need any of that, do we? But suffice to say, they are there, you can imagine them. It seems the Helmacrons have found Earth and are itching to do some conquering. We open on our two female Animorphs, Rachel and Cassie, having a discussion about what they should do with their time. Rachel wants a normal, casual beach day involving lying out in the sun and getting a tan. Cassie would rather be doing something outdoorsy and woodsy. You know, the two kinds of women. While that's happening, they spot something attached to the outside of an antique water pump that's on the farm where they are currently. It looks like a kind of toy Star Wars or Star Trek spaceship, and they think it is attached to the pump because the pump has been magnetized, because that is where Cassie has hidden the blue box that is capable of giving you Animorph powers. I lifted up the silver toy and examined it. It was about 3 or 4 inches long. It was shaped like a baton, with 3 clusters of 3 long tubes at the far end and a fierce alien Death's Head bridge at the front. I think I see where this is going. Our girls have not quite got there yet. We get another ship's log message where we learn that the Helmacrons were planning on recharging their ship at the strange energy source, only to be attacked by one of these strange alien monsters. They end up going to the beach and they run into Jake on their way home from there, and Cassie remarks that Jake has never seen her in a bathing suit before. In a hugely relatable moment, she's very nervous that he's going to think she's really dumpy, especially next to Rachel, but Rachel is a good friend. Cassie, you're so hopeless. Bear with me, she is a good friend. What you know about guys could fit on the head of a pin. Good grief, that is not a she looks dumpy look. That's a whoa, she looks hot, but I better not show any reaction or she'll get offended look. You know, women love that. Jake did not actually come over to reveal a new Animorph plan or anything. He's come over to drop off some stuff that's going to Goodwill. But enough domesticity, there is now a different toy spaceship attached to the water pump. It's definitely not the same one as last time. And then, to our utter amazement, the little toy ship separated from the water pump, turned to a level position and flew swiftly away, missing Rachel's head by inches. So Jake cancels their weekend off and it's time to regroup in the barn to come up with a plan. Obviously this is an alien, so they're a little bit out of their depth. It's time to talk to Axe. The first question, which is probably a sensible question, is this the Yeerks? Is that the new Yeerk technique they're trying out? But it doesn't really make sense for the Yeerks to be using a tiny spaceship. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to fly over to the Goodwill, where they have accidentally donated the first tiny spaceship. Under the guise of, oops, we didn't actually mean to donate that toy spaceship there, please can we have it back? They go into the back room of Goodwill. But before they can have a chance to have a proper look, another spaceship flies in. I think there are still only 2. I'm pretty sure this is the spaceship from before. And it shoots Jake. I mean, it's tiny, so it doesn't do any damage, but it does shoot Jake. Rachel, upon also being shot by the ship, does what she does best and grabs a baseball bat. They shoot some of her hair off, at which point Jake suggests a tactical retreat. The flying ship appears to kind of jumpstart the non-flying ship, and they both hover in the air staring at the Animorphs. Then, to our surprise, we heard a thought-speak voice in our heads. Aliens, give us the power source. Give it to us and we will let you live as our slaves. We will not crush and annihilate you as we will crush and annihilate all the people of this planet. Step 1 of alien invasion. Have clear goals and be non-negotiable. Oh, and because they are villains, the Helmacrons say that only one of the Animorphs can be allowed to live, and it will be whichever one brings them the cube. The Helmacrons aren't keen on the peace talks that Cassie tries to negotiate, and they shoot her a little bit more. Then they zoom out of the door, and it's all hands on deck, because presumably they are headed back for the cube. Thank goodness for Hawk Lookout Tobias, who can follow them while the others find the time to get into bird morph and get after them. While morphing back, they kind of check in with each other on the various things that are going on. Axe has no idea what a Helmacron is, which is frustrating, because he's normally our go-to guy for alien stuff. But he does point out that these aliens, while they are are, in theory, tiny, could be of any size. They could be using miniaturizing technology, they could be robots, we don't know. They managed to catch up with Tobias, which shouldn't be possible. He had a decent enough head start, but the Helmacrons have turned on him. Axe said what I'd only begun to think. A Draken beam too narrow to do more than sting a human being might have a very different effect on a creature as small as Tobias. Suddenly, the Helmacrons weren't all that funny. The Helmacrons do seem to have a strategy in the fight. They are aiming for Tobias's eyes. They're planning on blinding him. Thankfully, the others are now there to ward them off, but now they're zooming towards the pump and they're gonna get the blue box. But what's extra confusing is how they knew Tobias was anything more than an ordinary hawk. The Helmacrons, who are faster than birds, have beaten them to the pump and are now slicing it open, revealing the cube inside. They begin to lift it up with tractor beams, at which point the Animorphs leap into action again. They fight for all they're worth, but they're getting kind of tired. These bird morphs aren't really meant for extended battle. Rachel topples the ground exhausted. One of the Helmacron ships succeeds in blinding Axe. One of the ships breaks off and goes to go and try and pick the cube up again, and Cassie reasons that this might be one of the very few times where being a human is more useful than being in morph. The ship was heading towards the open barn door. Deliberately? No, that would be stupid. The Helmacron simply didn't know they were heading into what would be a trap. Now human, Cassie chases them into the barn, which as we know is full of animals of various kinds, including quite a lot of predators that her parents are rehabilitating. Cassie tries to reason with the Helmacrons. I mean, guys, come on, you surely can't take over the Earth, you are too small. They don't take kindly to this news. And we know this because suddenly there's a flash of bright light and Cassie starts to get very, very small. I guess the pop culture impact of 1989's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was still in effect at this point. I'm trying to remember when I went on the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids ride. It must have been in either the 90s or the early 2000s. I've never seen the film though. Cassie! I spun around and spotted Tobias swooping in like a 747 coming for a landing. Tobias, look out! They have a shrinking ray! A what? Flash! Never mind, you'll find out soon enough. In a ludicrously farcical moment, Marco then walks in, only to be shrunk himself before he has a chance to warn anyone else. Goodness, if only we had telepathic powers and we could talk to each other without being in the same room. Jake, Axe and Rachel manage to avoid the shrinking fate, and the other Helmacron ship has scarpered after Rachel hit it with a brick. So, having finished shrinking down to 3 inches tall, what next? Threaten to hit this ship with a brick as well. That's the plan. The threatening is broadly ineffective. The Helmacrons don't really understand the mighty power of a brick. They seem more focused on taking over humanity, talking about the Andalites, grovelling, etc, etc, basic villain stuff. Then the other ship comes back and zaps Rachel in the shoulder, causing her to drop the brick towards the 3-inch tall other Animorphs that are now on the floor. But Axe dives in and slices the brick in two with his tail, and our intrepid Animorphs live another day. Well, at least another 30 seconds. Momentary pause for Cassie to remark that seeing the person you have a crush on this close, at this scale, is not really the most appealing thing, which I can understand. Humans are pretty gross. The Helmacrons make one last attempt to fly off with the box, but Jake manages to stop them. So broadly speaking, it's a victory, except 3 of them are still 3 inches tall. So in the aftermath of all that, they decide that the Helmacrons are using the power of the blue box as a shrink ray because they weren't using it when they didn't have the box. It all makes sense. Time for some troubleshooting. Does morphing fix the shrinking issue? We were all thinking it, but no, alas, it would seem we are now just at scale. So if you morph small, you'll just morph even smaller. Axe ponders that it's probably a good idea to not morph Fleave today because at that point you'd probably be submicrobial. First thing is to get you guys somewhere safe, Jake said. Then, oh, Axe, morph to human, I heard Rachel yell. Cassie's dad is coming. So I suppose we'll have to muse on this at a later date. Having managed to stop Cassie's dad from inadvertently squishing his daughter and her friends, now the challenge is making Axe not seem totally weird. It's not super effective. Well, I think old Axe is handling that pretty well, Marco said brightly. You'd never guess he was an alien. An idiot, maybe. Alien? Nah. After asking Cassie's strange friends to leave, Cassie's dad trips up, kicking up a cloud of dirt, which at this scale pretty much buries Cassie. I mean, thankfully she doesn't die, and she can lift the boulders off herself. The boulders are tiny pieces of dust. We get it, she's very small. It would seem that their strength is also relative to their size, kind of like how ants can lift their body weight. That's what we're working with here. And just as they're working out what on earth you have to eat for lunch when you're 3 inches tall, who should show up again but our buddies the Helmacrons. I'm going to read the description so you can imagine them properly. Their heads were all we saw at first. They were perfectly flat on top, quite wide. From that flat top their faces came down in a sort of squashed inverted pyramid to a hooked barbed chin. Eyes sat atop the flat heads like big green marbles that looked like they could roll off at any moment. Their mouth parts looked insect-like with gnashing sideways teeth. As they climbed all the way into view, I could see that they were dressed in silvery one-piece suits covering bodies that were almost human, if you overlook the extra set of legs. The suits have turquoise collars. They sound fabulous. While the Helmacrons thinking they can take over the whole Earth from this size is kind of hilarious, the fact that now the Animorphs are the same size as them does mean those Draken beams could do a fairly lethal dose of damage. Surrounded by Helmacrons on all sides, it seems like all hope is lost, but then enter the giant cockroaches. And just to make this even more terrifying, Axe is leading the cockroach charge, not in cockroach morph because they don't have very good eyesight, he's in wolf spider morph, which at this scale is just... no. However, the Helmacrons were reacting. Do you think to terrify us with your pitiful morphs? We are the Helmacron warriors. They were yelling this as they hustled away at top speed. Truly a mood. The confidence and the fear. But these guys keep forgetting that at this scale the Helmacrons are very dangerous, and Axe learns this the hard way with a Draken beam shot or two. Oh, I have to tell you, the triumphant cry of the Helmacrons is neep neep, which I find hilarious. They are yelling at Axe to demorph before he dies, but he's worried that if he demorphs he'll crush the Animorphs, so the cockroaches yell for them to come over and be carried to safety. Yet another moment where saying it out loud makes it feel even less logical than it was when reading it. Under fire from all sides, there's no way they can get out of this alive. Cassie knows there's only one thing for her and Marco to do. They have to surrender. We can escape later. Axe has to demorph. Jake and Rachel too. The Helmacrons will stop firing long enough to take us. Being taken into the main ship, they see thousands of Helmacron fighter ships. There must be loads of them in here. Aha! You see our might and tremble. I see your might? Where's your tremble? Marco said. The Helmacrons stared with their wobbly marble eyes. Oh no, we're prisoners of creatures with no sense of humour, Marco said. Truly a worst-case scenario. The Helmacrons seem to have gone to a very intense form of evil villain school, probably more intense even than Visser 3, and they decide to make their captives crawl all the way through the ship to the captain. Now, this isn't much of a big deal because, as we say, the relative strength of the Animorphs is different, so it's not, like, difficult for them to do, but still, kinda intense. Finally, we seem to have arrived. We entered a room with a dome ceiling and a shallow bowl floor. In the centre of the room stood a single Helmacron. Beams of light illuminated him like a movie star on Oscar night. He looked like any of the Helmacrons, except for the fact that he was wearing a flowing gold cape. And there was one other difference. He's dead, I said. And not recently dead either. It seems like he was killed in some sort of, like, ceremonial, ritual way involving swords. So after some grovelling, because Evil Villain School is big on getting your captives to grovel before you, they want to know where the box is. Marco and Cassie genuinely don't know that others must have taken it and hidden it. The Helmacrons switch on the screen and show them their friends, still alive and still normal size, with the exception of Tobias, who is still tiny. The small aliens demand to know who knows the location of the box. The one with the hideous blue eyes, or the larger one? None of them, Marco said. The other one. The one who's not here. I nodded solemnly. Yes, the other one. This prompts the Helmacrons to reveal that the reason they knew that Tobias was not an ordinary hawk is because they can scan the energy signature from the blue box. But Cassie knows what this means. Oh, mighty masters, I said, we were fools to imagine we could deceive you. There is only one other like us on this planet, only one other who possesses the transforming power. It is he who has the blue box of transforming power. It is he whom you must find. It is he whom you must defeat. I see where this is going. You see where this is going. Marco is a little bit more slow on the uptake. But eventually he gets it. We're taking the Helmacrons to Visser 3. So in an effort to explain where Visser 3 might be, you know, Yik-Pool, potentially in the atmosphere in his blade ship, all of the above, they have to explain the Yik invasion to the Helmacrons, who it turns out have heard of the Yiks before, but this prompts them to, have an argument? The yelling and gabbling and wild gesticulating went on at a furious pace for quite a while. Suddenly, without warning, there were steel blades flashing. Where the blades had come from, I couldn't say. All this dies down, and some of the Helmacrons are just dead. They've been stabbed through with swords. This isn't really explained at this point, so back to chatting about where that box might be, where the Visser 3 is. They reckon the best bet is to get to his blade ship / the pool ship in orbit. The Helmacrons summon a male to instruct them in the best ways of subservience, which is where we learn that all of these other Helmacrons are not in fact male, they are women. This is a matriarchal society. And of course Marco has to comment on that with, oh man, now I'm really scared, it's an entire species of Rachels. I mean, they've been more successful in capturing Animorphs than the entire Yik invasion force, so I've got to hand it to the Helmacrons here. Girl boss. Instead of seeing this as an interesting opportunity to dissect his own thoughts and opinions on gender roles and gender stereotypes, Marco calls the Helmacron male who's been summoned a wuss, before demanding to know, why is the captain dead? The Helmacron, who thankfully has no concept of wuss, explains that the Helmacrons, if you make an error, you have to be killed, and if you are a captain, odds are you will make a lot of errors because you have to make a lot of decisions. So it's just sort of easier all round to already have a dead captain because then everyone can just respect them. He gives them the rules, which are to obey females, wash your food before eating it, and genuinely be calm and quiet and obedient. If not, they could be killed or even made captains, so best follow the instructions. Time to regroup. Just in this momentary pause here, they reckon that while the Helmacrons are going after Visser 3, they're not going to be going after the other Animorphs, but they will eventually need to go back and reunite the Helmacrons with the blue box, if only to unshrink them. Since the Helmacrons seem a little, I'm going to go with unhinged rather than the words that Marco uses. So priority number 1 is to not help them get Visser 3. Priority number 1 is let's get out of here. Cassie agrees, but at that point another female Helmacron has come in and takes them up to the bridge to reveal, by showing them on the screen, they have indeed reached Visser 3's blade ship. Again, these Helmacrons, they work fast. It take like 7 books to get to the blade ship. They found the ship, but a smaller craft has detached and is heading back down to Earth. It's probably the Visser, definitely going to go and get the blue box. Yes, Helmacrons, we should go after him for that reason. They follow the ship, which for obvious reasons is invisible to humans, and it lands in an abandoned restaurant. Like the roof even does the opening thing, like the swimming pool in Thunderbirds. It's very cool. So these little alien interludes are still happening, and at this point we really get the sense that the two ships, the Planet Crusher and the Galaxy something, it'll be in my notes later, are really definitely at odds with one another. In this case, the one crew is particularly annoyed that the prisoners that were rightfully theirs have been taken by the other ship. Meanwhile, Visser 3 has morphed human and gone into his limo because the best villains travel in limousines. It's a tinted glass thing. Coming in line with the back mirror, the Helmacrons fire on the limousine, but it's not super effective. It just sort of gets Visser 3 to wind down the window and see what's going on. But right now, he didn't look frightening so much as puzzled. I saw his huge human mouth form the word, "What?" And then slowly the expression turned to amazement. Helmacrons? The mouth said silently. Oh, silently. They managed to get a couple of good point-blank shots in, which makes the Visser, while the Helmacrons think he's trembling in terror, Marco and Cassie see it as more rage. They have to take evasive manoeuvres as the limo swerves to hit them, and yeah, they get shot at, which at this scale is kind of like having a 40-foot cannon aimed at you. They manage to survive, but the Helmacron ladies are getting angry. More driving, more shooting. Of course, throughout all this, the Helmacrons kept up their lunatic cheering and yahooing and neep-neeping. The extravagant threats and insults flowed constantly. Just keep that in your mental picture of events. Neep-neep. They almost get hit by oncoming traffic, which causes the Helmacrons to have an argument about whether they should fly up or down, which causes more of the kind of discussing, by which I mean stabbing each other with swords kind of thing. Might be time to morph out of there, but if you do any big morphs, the Helmacrons will see them, so even though we said it would be a really bad idea earlier, time to go small. We're going flies, not fleas, but still pretty teeny. They morph. We've gone through how disgusting it is to morph fly, let's skip past that. Just then, the nearest Helmacrons noticed what was happening. "You will cry for all eternity for this," they yelled. Villain school does teach you the catchiest of phrases. As the Helmacrons try to grab the rapidly shrinking Cassie, she realises she can see individual cells. It's the worst time ever for a biology lesson, but this is what we're working with. Since they're smaller, they are now faster or experiencing time in a different way, so that hand reaching towards them is now incredibly slow. It's time to try and get away, but at this scale, even if they flew for like a week, and they would be stuck in tiny flymorph after that. But even if they flew for a week, they wouldn't get very far. Better grab onto that Helmacron finger and not think too hard about how you're sensing the individual vibrations of molecules. And it wouldn't be Animorphs without escalating peril. The cell that they're stood on is about to divide. They leave the finger behind, only to land on a Helmacron's head right next to its eyeball. And there they see the wave of energy that is a Draken beam, watching physically as cells are torn apart. There's then a little tidbit which I expect comes from a spin-off book. My guess is that, which is that the Draken beams are Yik technology, but they're adapted from Andalite technology. Andalites invented the shredder that was a fairly painless way to kill people. The Yiks turned it into a pretty painful way to kill people because Yikes. Time to run away again. Everywhere there was fire. Everywhere there was deep, pounding bass drum noise. We were in a whirlwind that moved with weird slowness and impossible to resist force. Or what I imagine a music festival to be like. Right then they are too disorientated from what must have been a Draken beam hitting the ship. Time to demorph and cross your fingers that you aren't suddenly tiny in the middle of the highway. They wind up landing on someone's head, complete with mites, because we're getting all of the gross close-up human body stuff in this one. And whose head is it? Well, it's Vice Principal Chapman, of course. He's had a few books off, but he's back. But then, at last, Tobias turns up. He lands on the head too. He's filling us in on what's been going on. How did you find us? The other Helmacron ship, the Planet Crusher. Rachel managed to smash it with a tire iron, knocked it down. Jake grabbed it and clamped it into that vice in Cassie's barn. So having squeezed the vice until the Helmacrons agreed to help, which Cassie and Marco think is fairly foolish, but it's okay guys, we took hostages, they've given us some of their biggest leaders. Oh no, time to reveal that their leaders are all dead and they don't matter anyway. But where are they exactly? Well, the whole Animorphs gang, regular and fun size, are at a meeting of the sharing. Been a long time since we've been here, but yeah, it's all the higher-ups and Visser 3 is proudly showing off his new tiny spaceship. While the Yik higher-ups clap for for their leader finally doing something successful for once, Cassie remembers the blue box. Thankfully, Axe has it. He's in human morph outside. Once this rescue mission is complete, the plan is to go and ask the Helmacrons still in the vice if they can change them back. Infallible logic, by which I mean completely fallible. The Helmacrons have obviously escaped the vice, they can track the blue box, they're going to find them. Thank goodness Cassie is there to remind them of these things. Tobias flaps off the head to try and intercept, but it's too late. The other ship, Planet Crusher, is flying in with the blue box in tow. Galaxy Blaster, that's the other ship's name. Apparently the Galaxy Blaster's crew being dead by Yeerk Drakenbeam is enough to convince these ships that actually they were friends the whole time and it's time to do some avenging. But angry Helmacrons are effective Helmacrons, and they do indeed manage to shrink Visser 3 down as well. The Animorphs, who are at an effective size, swoop in. Not to save the Visser, but to stop the blue box from falling into Yeerk hands. The blue box! The morphing cube! Get it, you fools! Nothing else matters, get that box! If you're playing the Animorphs drinking game, please drink. Visser 3 called someone a fool. From Cassie's somewhat tricky vantage point, we see an Andalite, a Peregrine Falcon, and a bear try and take down the Visser and the controllers. It's pure Animorphs chaos with a lot of yelling, shrinking, all of the above. And of course, some more of the Animorphs get shrunk. Cassie has to morph in order to thought speak, so she opts for Skunk, which is, you know, small but not single cell. She yells for Tobias to come and get her and Marco. They're small enough now that he can pick them up. Cassie's plan, it turns out, hinges on something that I've been thinking about since this whole shrinking thing happened. We know that if you go small, you get smaller. What happens if you get bigger? Tobias at this size is too small a threat for the Helmacrons to worry about, so they manage to slip through their defences and land on the ship. Tobias is going to morph from Hawk to human, which is a lot of weight for the ship to carry, especially since it's also carrying the cube. And Cassie's going to bust out her biggest morph. Whale. The astute among you, and Marco, will notice that whales do not have the appendages needed to hold on to a moving spaceship, but Cassie's plan is to just sort of wedge herself in amongst the engine. Well, this is definitely it, Marco said. We have at last achieved maximum weirdness. We're the size of pimples, looking up at a bird-turned boy who looks huge because he's maybe a quarter of an inch tall, as we fly around on the back of a toy-sized spaceship, which we hope to crash by having Cassie turn into a whale the size of a baby mouse, so we can defeat a race of lunatics with brains the size of bacteria. That does it. The votes are in. The Oscar for absolute insanity goes to us. Everyone go home. We rule the lunatic world. Just a helpful quick summary from Marco there in case you switched off halfway through the video. As Cassie grows larger and larger, a couple of Helmacrons pop out of a hatch to see just what's going on, but the Helmacrons are no match for slightly larger Animorphs. They demand that they surrender, or Cassie keeps morphing and weighing the ship down even more. But then a hand grabs hold of the ship, and maybe it would be better to be Helmacron prisoners than to be Yeerk prisoners, and they watch in slow motion as Axe's tail blade comes down and slices off the thumb of the hand. The ship pulls free with Cassie the whale still wedged in place. So now Axe has the ship, and he's still full size. Everyone else has been shrunk, but Axe is still Axe. You're safe! Not hardly. Rachel and I are not alone. Visser 3 and about 20 controllers are coming up the leg after us. We've got a very small tiger and a very small grizzly bear here against Visser 3, who has morphed into some kind of bizarre monster. And the Helmacrons are abandoning ship because everything's going wrong. Meanwhile, Axe, who has everyone else on one of his legs, unclear which, has escaped the controllers, but is now in an area where he does really need to morph or everyone's going to see him in Andalite form. Where should I go? Axe asked, sounding as frustrated as I felt. Tobias, Cassie, Marco, where should I run when I have formed my human legs? If you found this video with no context, I can't imagine what you think is going on. But Cassie is on the ball. Axe has to morph, but not to human. We need a flight morph. Something with wings because they need to go to the gardens, and it's time for a new morph. I love it when they go to the zoo. First, they do have to live long enough to make it to the gardens, which is extra difficult because they are on Axe as he is morphing, which at this scale, very difficult. Somehow, we all ended up on the same wing. One of Axe's legs must have melted with his hand to make this wing. Jake and Rachel are just half an inch away. The Yeerks are coming on fast, and the Helmacrons are forming into what looks like an army about a quarter of an inch away. Speedy morph time so the Yeerks don't realise that they're humans. The Visser is apparently in one of his fun alien morphs. It's sort of like a tentacle, but the tentacles have knives kind of situation, alongside a bunch of fairly confused and scared human controllers. I saw none of the Visser's usual cool arrogance. Strange place to meet for our final battle, Andalites, he said, but battle we must. That was pretty calm for him. I think maybe the fact that he was the size of a dandruff flake depressed him. It would depress me too. But who should show up but the Helmacrons at that point? And it just might seem that the Yeerks and the Andalite bandits have a common enemy. But before we can have this wonderful coming together moment, Cassie realises they've got to the gardens and it's time to jump off. But at that point the Visser decides that he's not too fussed about the Helmacrons and he'd much rather chase the Animorphs, so he jumps too. And the controllers follow. And the Helmacrons follow. Nothing has changed, it's just falling down. So Cassie's plan hinges on the fact that when the Helmacrons shrunk them, all of the DNA, including all the DNA for the morphs they had already stored, must have shrunk as well. So if they acquire new DNA, that should still be normal size to morph. So time to see if that works, and yes, we're here for the front cover. It's Anteater time, the perfect morph to deal with Helmacrons. Sadly, the Visser spots them, which means that he does now also know the secret to becoming large, or at least larger than 3 inches. But no time to worry about that, because they are in fact growing in size. Cassie, partly because it was the plan and partly on Anteater instinct, licks up a whole bunch of Helmacrons. I felt something in my mouth, something kind of like teeth, only not, begin to chew. "No!" I yelled, freezing my jaw muscles. Then, to my utter astonishment, I heard from deep inside my own mouth, "Surrender now, and we may spare you the eternal torment you have earned." Persistence is key. I mean, the Helmacrons have it. I heard another thought-speak voice, lower and more sinister. "Sentimental Andalite fool," Visser 3 said. He had copied our trick. He had also morphed Anteater. "You can't kill a Helmacron. They're a fungible species. Kill one and its mind, if you can call it a mind, is absorbed into another. They never die. Even when they're dead, they're not dead. But when it comes to Andalites..." Anteater Visser is mean, and he snaps up Tobias in his own Anteater tongue. But before the Visser can chow down on our favourite bird boy, Andalite Axe leaps into action and holds his tail blade against the Anteater Visser's throat. Again, this book got real weird. So it's time for some negotiations. Having confirmed that the Helmacrons aren't really killable, which is pretty good because otherwise our Animorphs would have to be kind of murderers for quite a bit of this book, they persuade some of the males to reverse the shrink ray and bring them all back to size. The Visser agrees that maybe it would be easier to take over Earth if he wasn't 3 inches tall or having to acquire morphs all the time. So he agrees that he will be unshrunk, so will the human controllers, and then they will leave, which allows the Animorphs to be unshrunk as well. Embiggened. After a moment of trying to persuade the male Helmacrons that maybe they don't want to be subservient after all, Jake and Cassie plan a beach date. The Helmacron ship powered up and rose towards the night sky, and receding in the distance we heard the thought-speak voices. "All females will now grovel before our tremendous power. You will worship us as your true masters. It is the male Helmacron who shall make all tremble." Well, I guess as long as they aren't doing it on Earth. And that is Animorphs 24. It is a pretty weird one. I think it's gonna get weirder from here. And that's a lot. We are proceeding on with Animorphs. If you haven't watched my video talking about various projects and where I'm up to with things, the plan is to keep going with Animorphs and try and finish by April of 2023. So there's plenty of Animorphs content to come. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. Come hang out on Discord. I have a dedicated Animorphs channel where we can chat rather than having in YouTube comments because I don't have the time. Come chat there. Do all of the things. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now. Thank goodness for Hawk Lookout to... From Cassie's... My legs are not functioning. Why can't I talk? Neep neep.